Well, hello, everyone. Welcome to our Silicon Global show. And we're here today with a VC from Mumbai. So we really are spanning the globe with our show that we started over a year and a half ago when COVID hit. And we stopped doing our live events and started doing online events. So it's been fun doing this Ask a VC show. And thank you for many of you joining us many times. As you know, we do have a whole group of offerings, and you can see our videos online. Most of our sessions are recorded, and this one today will also be recorded. We have our newsletter, and we have our Circle membership, and I know many of you are members of our Silicon Dragon Circle, so I do appreciate that. So next, would like to introduce Sandeep Murthy. He's going to be on the show with us today. And as I said, he's zooming in from Mumbai. I've known Sandeep for a long time, actually. We met, it was either in Silicon Valley or Mumbai. I followed his career, his very successful career in venture tech investing, particularly as it has to do with India. As you can see here, I've highlighted my book, Startup Asia, here in the middle, because about a third of the content was from India. And I talked a lot about how India was the up-and-comer after China, and I think we're starting to see that now play out. So I think Sandeep has a great slide here that I want to show. The party is just getting started. So I think we're going to delve into that. Why is the party just getting started? So let me just say a few words about Sandeep. Okay, he's really, I would characterize him as a builder of India's internet economy. He was an early investor in Mobi and InfoEdge, two Indian billion-dollar companies. In Mobi in mobile advertising and InfoEdge in classified. He was also the chairman of ClearTrip, which is sort of like an Expedia of India. He was a partner at Sherpalo Ventures, managing that fund for Ram Shriram and also Kleiner Perkins in India. He was associate director at IAC, which I think many of you know is Expedia Techmaster, Home Shopping Network, and he launched Gifts.com during that time. He's very much into music, the founder of Digital Music Group, which was incubated and sold to Sony early on. He started his career at CSFB Technology Group in Palo Alto after graduating from the University of Pennsylvania in engineering and an MBA in Wharton. And he is a part-time disc jockey still today. So good for you, Sandeep. Sounds like a great hobby to have. Now, Lightbox Ventures is based in Mumbai, founded 2014, 3 funds. Each one is successively larger. They invest in 8 to 10 deals per fund. They do early stage to late stage. The sectors are fairly diverse, but one unifying element to all of them is that they are trying to solve uniquely India problems. So some of the notable deals are Rebel Foods, Droom, Paymate, Melora, Imbibe. We're going to be talking about some of these, so we'll get into details about them. There was a very successful IPO, Truecaller, just recently on NASDAQ Stockholm. So yeah, that's a little bit about Sandeep and a little bit about Lightbox. And so I'm going to launch into our chat here. I'd also encourage you to please ask away your questions, and you can put those into the chat box here, and we'll get to your questions as we go along. So, well, hello, Sandeep. Tell us, is the party really getting started in India, and if so, why?
Yeah, first of all, Rebecca, thank you for having me. And I've also followed you over the many years, and I think you've tracked the market and did a great job of explaining what's been happening. So it really is a pleasure to be here and chatting with you about it. You know, I think that we had a slide in our annual meeting deck where we said, this time it's different. And I've been accused of saying that many times over the years. And I think that this time it really is different. And this time things have really changed. I think that, look, over the last 2 years, as we've gone through the pandemic, we've seen a major accelerant in the change of consumer behavior. And so as a result of that, all of the things that we were hoping companies would achieve in the previous years and all of the growth and the shift in user behavior that was going to take place got massively accelerated. They say that necessity is the mother of innovation. And I think we all as people needed a way to get our goods, our services. We couldn't leave home. The lockdown was pretty draconian in the first wave. And I think that really shifted stuff. And so along with that, I think the realization came that, look, this is going to be a new reality. And this is how people are actually going to live going forward. And it's just more efficient. It works. If I don't have to go down the road to get everything, I think that is just an easier life. And so that kind of was a realization. There was again, I just remember some of the things that we went through in our annual meeting where we had a quote from John Chambers. And John Chambers, I'm sure many of your listeners know, was the CEO of Cisco for many years. And he said that if he was betting on two countries in Asia, it would be India twice. And I think that sentiment is carrying across for many people. And I think that that's why you're seeing the receptiveness to companies where it used to be the case that Indian public investors were not willing to take or look at money-losing businesses. And today, earlier this year, we saw Zomato go public as a company that was losing money and was very well received. I think there's a willingness and a leash being given to businesses that can articulate a clear vision of the future to say, okay, I think it's possible. And I often say that we're as investors in the game of what if, and what if this happened, and what if that changed, and what if this went on. And I think the public market's starting to accept that. So, I mean, I can keep going on and on with the story, but I guess the point I would make at a broad level is to say that all of the potential that we had been waiting for in terms of technology companies delivering a value proposition to users and users wanting it has happened and is continuing to grow. And I think what happened this year was public investors were also willing to bet on that. And there's lots of things that we can talk about that influence that, but that's why I would say that the party is getting started. And yeah, let me stop there because I'll keep going and we can go in whichever direction you'd like.
Okay, sure. Well, why would you say that some of the companies that you're investing in are going after unique Indian problems? And what are those unique Indian issues that you think are really investable?
So, look, I think India has a lot of unique aspects to it. And we'd said at one point that, India has managed to create inefficiency at scale. And if you've been here, you've been around, and I think you've seen the difficulty of navigating and going from place to place. And it's not that we want it that way, it's how the country has evolved. And that evolution has made it such that some simple things are hard to do. And I think that the other reality of India is it's a country that's very fragmented. Infrastructure has taken a long time to evolve. I mean, it's fragmented from the standpoint of religions, political parties, cultures, languages. I mean, all of it is all very disparate. And that's translated as well into a fragmentation of brands. And so we don't necessarily have this big behemoth set of companies that exist. And so therefore everyone is kind of taking their little piece of the pie. Now, the inefficiency and the fragmentation together mean that the way you need to approach the market looks different than perhaps even a large market like China, and definitely from a developed market like the US or Europe. And so I'll give you an example. Let's look at the furniture market. So if I want to get furniture in India, I've had really two choices. I can get a carpenter. I have an apartment. I can get a carpenter. He will come home with a bunch of wood, nails, hammer, and start making the furniture in my house. And literally, they will sit in the hallway or outside the main door, and they will be sawing and banging and cutting, and that's how you get your furniture made. Or if you're lucky, they'll actually make it off-site, but you're getting it made from scratch. And that process can be good and bad. It's custom, so it's nice. It's bad because oftentimes the quality can be suspect and there's all sorts of other issues. Or you can buy ready-made cheap furniture. Now, in this market of, let's say, $20 billion of furniture, your choices were pretty poor. So here, Furlenco as a furniture rental business. Now, understand furniture rental businesses in the West are regarded as what are the ones? Aaron's and Rent-A-Center are regarded as rental options for the lower income portion of society. And so they are regulated actually by the government to make sure that they're not charging usury rates. And in India, it's an aspirational product. So we have a business for Lenco that actually rents out furniture to people. They make about 7% monthly yield on the capital that they deploy and turn into furniture. So over the course of a year, they pretty much recoup the cost of the furniture. And so that model found its uniqueness and opportunity in India. And now we start to see it get replicated in other places around the world. I'll give you one more example and then we can move to something else. But Rebel Foods, which you mentioned earlier,
Yeah.
cloud kitchen business. Now, here again, you had companies in the US. You had Grubhub, Seamless Grubhub, you had Munchery, you had a variety of companies going after what were virtual kitchens. They weren't really cloud kitchens in the sense they were delivery models of food in some way. Now, again, the difference between, let's say, the US and China and India, the US has over 75 chains that have at least 500 locations. China has 50 chains of QSRs that have over 500 locations. India had 3. And those 3, interestingly, were Subway, Domino's, and McDonald's. And so as a result, you just didn't have scaled Indian food in a organized manner across the country. Now, there's 2 reasons why. One, rents are very high. So you're charging Manhattan rates, and your revenue, however, on the other side is in rupees. So you're making rupees. So that gap between the 2 things was too large. So in that context, if you wanted to create an organized, scaled set of brands, the best way to do it was to reduce your rent, de-risk the entire idea of launching new restaurants, and then be able to generate your revenue in rupees that you do. And so that made India the right place to start this business and build it out. And that's what Rebel did. They started in India. They started actually as an offline set of restaurants where people walked in. When we invested in the company, that was the year where we started to make the shift towards the cloud kitchen. And at that time, we didn't know what to call them. We called them ghost kitchens, virtual kitchens, and we got the cloud kitchens. And so that unique set of circumstances made it the right place to start. And from there, today, we've taken the model that we've understood, we've scaled, we've refined, and we're now operating in the Middle East, we're in the UK, we're in Southeast Asia. And so now we're the largest global player in the cloud kitchen space because we started in a market where the need was very clear and evident, and you could refine and scale that way.
Right. Now, so yeah, the cloud kitchens have really caught on now in the US and in China and in India now too. So, and as you said, the company is going global. So it's very interesting to see this happening. Now, one of the points that you make about why the party is just getting started is that the India tech companies represent what, 8% of the GDP of India's economy, but the market value is so minuscule in comparison to that. So there's a huge upside. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, so actually, if you look at it, Indian digital companies represent about 8% of GDP. So they contribute 8% to GDP. And then you look at the overall market cap of the exchange, and it's at about 2.6 trillion. Now, if you translated that 8% contribution to GDP to 8% of the market value, it should be about a little over 200 billion. Now, the problem is that 8% is actually currently only represented at 0.5% in market value. And so as a result, you have this massive headroom of nearly $185 billion of value that still needs to be represented in the public market. This year alone, we went from about 15 billion so far to about 70 billion. Based on the IPOs that are in the works, that number should go up to about 100 billion. And so even if I take that into account, we still have another 100 billion to add, just assuming that you value correctly the contribution to GDP in market value terms. Now, that's not even accounting for the fact that many of these businesses in the tech space are going to grow in their contribution to GDP, because that's what we've seen happen in every other market. In every other market, as tech penetrates, old businesses either become more techified, or tech businesses, pure tech businesses, take over the wallet share of the older companies. And so that 8% number will grow, and therefore that relative position in overall market value will also grow. So given all this, I think that, look, the number of private unicorns is just going to continue to increase. If I take the period of time from 2010 till 2021, in that period, in 2010, it took about 120 months to create 40 unicorns. Today, it seems like there's one a month. There's actually even more than one a month. In 2011, in 11 months, we created 40 unicorns. And so what's happening is this realization that we're at an intrinsically misrepresented position in terms of the value potential of these businesses versus their contribution to the economy is evolving. And people, look, some will be right, some will be wrong, but in general, the trend is correct, saying that if you're going to contribute more to GDP, you should be represented larger in terms of market value. And so that's definitely happening.
Right, right. And are you seeing that this view is seen in the international markets? It's a domestic India view that, okay, India is finally coming, it's having its time, right? It was predicted for many, many years, and now maybe it is really happening. Do you think that this view is being heard or seen or shared around the world? Are you seeing more investment coming into India from overseas markets?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, look, there have been a lot of, I would say, geopolitical challenges and issues over the past year. And I think that brought hiccups, whether it was in relation to Chinese capital and its ability or inability to come in, and it was coming in quite aggressively for a period of time. I think that was very quickly replaced by larger funds, both from the US and Europe, that have started to invest more aggressively at the later stages. I think SoftBank's always had a presence in India and has continued to double down on that. So absolutely, and by the way, then there are domestic funds that are continuing to grow in size and numbers, and so us included in that. And I would say that, yeah, absolutely, there's a view, and as I talk to LPs out there, there's clearly a view that they better have had a strategy, and if they don't, they need to get one in place now because things are clearly moving. And so, and also, look, it doesn't hurt the fact that China's been having its own challenges and questions, and so therefore I think people are saying, look, I generated lots of return. I think there's a reality that there's excessive amounts of liquidity in the world, and as that liquidity looks to continue to find returns, I think that India's positioning itself well. And look, that applies to investments going into tech, that applies to investments going into legacy areas or more traditional areas, exports. Look, I think and the great thing is, right now, I think the government recognizes the importance of all this. If you want to continue to grow your per capita GDP, you're going to have to foster additional industries. And to foster additional industries, that means exports have to start to become a bigger part of what the country is all about. And consistently, from April to December, the country has remained over $30 billion a month in exports, which is a massive growth year on year and every month. This year will cross 400 billion in total exports over the financial year, which is the first time ever we've achieved that number. All of that means that should create more jobs, that should create more opportunities for people to increase their wages and therefore lift per capita GDP, which in turn will increase domestic consumption as well. So I think we're entering a place where there's a virtuous cycle setting in. And I think that people are recognizing that and seeing that across sectors and saying, look, there's many opportunities in lots of places. There's either tech replacing, traditional businesses organizing and growing, and therefore there's many different ways to play the market right now. And I think that's attracting a lot of people.
Sure, sure. So it's no longer an outsourcing services market of Infosys and Wipro and Tata. It's much more diverse in tech innovation across many areas, finance and commerce and even AI, India's gotten into. So I think you have an India AI company, Imbibe, and that's, from what I recall, just got a very large investment from an outside group as well.
Yeah, Imbibe actually, again, if you look at the education problems or challenges, again, India's unique situation, education, healthcare, we have a massive imbalance between the experts and the people that need their services. So we have too few teachers against students, we have too few doctors against patients. And so ultimately, if we want to solve these problems, again, I said earlier, necessity is the mother of innovation. Here again, we have a need. It's not an option. We're not looking at it and saying, well, do I send the kids to preschool down the road or do I educate them using some computer at home? Many times there's no preschool. Oftentimes there's a preschool, there's no teacher. And so you have to think about the ways to make this happen without, otherwise we have no option. And so Imbibe set down that path. They said, we started with test prep, and test prep was the simple low-hanging fruit to say, how do I facilitate people preparing for exams using a platform that's not driven by a rock star teacher having to teach them, but it's driven by a system that runs more efficiently. And so Imbibe built a system that said that, look, if I can learn how the best students learn and how the best students navigate the exams, I can give that feedback to the other students, saying that if you took 30 seconds on question number 4, the best student took 20 seconds, or the best student took 50 seconds, you're either going too slow or too fast. This is what you need to focus on. If you get these 5 questions wrong continuously, this is the base concept you need to understand, all of which is mapped out using tech in the back end. And so Imbibe actually, we exited our position in the business, sold to Reliance, which is a large conglomerate here who's moved from the oil world to the data and tech world. And their story is just amazing in that shift. And they made it very clear. They believe education is the starting point of everything. And they've invested significantly. They invested significantly to acquire the business, and they've continued to invest significantly in the business. And Aditi, who's the founder there, remains a good friend of ours. And I think she couldn't be happier with the opportunity she has to build this platform with that network out there. And I think that's the kind of stuff that's going to make a big change overall in the market.
Sure, sure. So are you seeing more investors coming from that would normally be in China now turning toward India as the next emerging market in Asia? Because of the problems in China tech, the regulations, the censorship, the issues over too big is not great. So are you seeing some of the VCs that were very active in China now looking toward India? And if so, what's your view of these new VCs that are entering the market?
So look, I don't think that anyone's abandoning China at this point. To me, it feels like they are reassessing how aggressive perhaps they want to be there. They're rethinking some of the expectations on what it might look like in the short term. But I think that people have done extremely well in China. People have benefited from the growth in that market. And so I think as an investor, it would be difficult to turn your back on that and say, okay, it's all over and let's move on. I think that what is happening, like I said, I think that there's large amounts of liquidity in the world. And so those same investors actually have a large amount of liquidity. And now they're realizing that there is a real opportunity that's emerged here and that it's actually monetizable. There are things happening that now perhaps data points can be provided. The metric that we look at in our business is DPI, so dollars returned, and dollars are getting returned at a significant level. So I think at any point in time, I would say perhaps the attention and the focus may be at this level before in China, assuming people can see me, but at a high level in China and at a low level in India. And I think what's happening right now is perhaps the two are coming more in balance. But I find it very hard to believe anyone would turn their back on China and say it's just way too difficult. I think China's clear that they have their own way that they want to navigate it. And I'm sure that smart entrepreneurs and investors will understand how to navigate that to create opportunities for people to make money there as well. Meanwhile, I do think that India is getting its act together and a lot of great things are happening. And I think people notice that. So people are willing to take more meetings. We are getting much more proactive outreach. People are reaching out to us, wanting to engage, wanting to learn, which is really refreshing. Because look, I think as an investor raising money, you have a multitude of things to sell. The thing that I want to have the conversation about is, do you like our strategy or not like our strategy? And in the past, I've had to have 2 additional layers or levels of conversation before we get to my strategy. It is, do you like venture and tech or not? Which is, I guess, a fundamental question. But then the third is, am I selling you India? And if I have to sell you India, that's hard. And we've done it and we've been successful in getting there. But now when the country's selling itself, it's a much nicer position.
Well, what are the selling points for India, particularly versus China? I mean, you hear about, democratic country, English speaking, rising middle class, and so forth. But then on the flip side, you hear about the infrastructure problems, the bureaucracy. So what are the advantages and disadvantages of India as a market, as a tech innovation market?
So look, as an investor investing in, let's say, tech businesses that are trying to provide a better product or a better service to customers, the backdrop of chaos and inefficiency is perfect, right? I mean, if you think about it, if everything worked smoothly and everything was easy, my job would be a lot harder. And then we would be having the conversation of, are we really going to be at the bleeding edge of all the tech innovation in the world? Right now, if I think about what we have to do well, we have to figure out how to take technology that works, apply it in a market that is chaotic, and figure out how to give the customer a great value proposition in that. That's pretty straightforward. And I'm not worried about, am I building a better mousetrap than exists anywhere else in the world? I'm trying to use the mousetrap from somewhere else that has already been proven to work. I'm using, let's say, the ability to search for a product online and buy it, and putting that into our market and saying, okay, look, I can now sell you jewelry online without having to have you go to a store and buy something. So I would say that, this makes it very attractive. Now, outside of that, sure, 1.3 billion people, growing per capita GDP, young demographic, increasingly urbanizing, and actually it was an interesting revelation for us as we thought about what urbanization meant. India is far behind other countries on urbanization, and it doesn't matter anymore. I think the pandemic has shown us that basically, if you can earn a living and spend your money, you can live anywhere. And I think that people have realized that. So now being in a city is not a prerequisite for participating in an organized, formal, growing economy. And so urbanization has now become more a state of mind than a place. And so these realities are opening up massive portions of the market and are opening up consumption in places that I think people didn't realize. I'll give you an example. We have a jewelry business called Malora. Now, the company sells fine jewelry. So it's not fake jewelry. It's real gold, real diamonds, real precious stones. The average selling price is about $300. So in a country where the average per capita income is about $2,100, $300 is significant. Now, when you think about that, we today generate about 40% of our sales from tier 2 and below cities in the country. So this is after the first 50 big cities that you can name in India, which even I couldn't name. But after that, the tier cities, they generate 40%. So that means that they have the consumption capacity at that level, and they are repeat buying and they're growing. And so if that market exists for fine jewelry, and we've seen in these rural markets, we've seen data consumption increase over the years. We've seen increase of food delivery. All of these things have changed. And so I think that this is the opportunity that exists. Everything can be improved upon, right? There's no aspect of life here that seems unimprovable and majorly improved upon.
Right. Okay. So for an American company, let's say we have some people here from Silicon Valley on the Zoom. Is there an opportunity for a Silicon Valley tech company to get into India at all, or are all the spots kind of taken by the domestic Indian companies?
Look, I think that Uber is here, Amazon's here, Facebook's here, Google's here. People continue to come on a regular basis, and I would say that we pick segments as investors that are not as easily transferable from other countries. So for example, as an investor, I found it more difficult to invest in the Amazon of India, which was Flipkart. And they just required a lot more capital. And today Flipkart is the Walmart of India because they were bought by Walmart. And I would say that Ola is the Uber of India, and they're competing with Uber. And I would say that, definitely there are businesses and areas for companies from the US to come in. I think that it's probably not a copy paste that works the same way. I mean, the uniqueness of India has to be accounted for. And so, for example, let's say cash on delivery. That was a big part of how transactions need to take place in India. That's a reality of life. Let's say now today, quick commerce. or last mile delivery is becoming really big. I can get anything I want. We have a company called Dunzo in our portfolio. It's similar to Gorillas in Europe, or I'm blanking on the name, not Grubhub, GoPuff. Sorry, GoPuff in the US, which has recently raised a lot of money. The idea is, look, we'll deliver things to you very quickly. And we can deliver things to you very quickly because we now have dark warehouses, we're storing all the product. So in that context, what does a grocery delivery business really look like? If I can get it delivered in 19 minutes to my home, deliver, and in a house, houses are small, refrigerators are small. People aren't driving to a Costco and loading up for the month and storing it in their pantry or their garage. I mean, they're buying every day. We buy from the vegetable guy every day. He's right down the road, you can buy. Now I can buy it through Dunzo, and Dunzo will deliver it every day. So if you're gonna come into the market, I would argue that, look, there are probably learnings that you have, but the challenge will be how do you navigate that in the context of the unique aspects of the market?
Right. Okay. Is there an opportunity for, this is a question from one of the audience members, is there an opportunity for a digital health company that might be interested in launching in India? And a second question kind of related to that, do you also invest outside of India into any other companies that kind of have universal problems that, universal to all countries? So 2 questions here from Rebecca Frankel. Thank you, Rebecca, for the questions. Go ahead, Sandeep.
So look, digital health, as I mentioned before, we have one of the worst patient to doctor ratios in the world. And I think that it's going to be very hard for that to improve. And so we have 2 investments in the healthcare space. Now, I'll talk in that context and then expand it because I need to have the numbers there. We've invested in a pharmacy business called Zeno that operates physical pharmacies and does it in a tech-enabled environment. I think that what we're seeing, I mean, globally right now with Warby Parker being public, Allbirds going public, this omni-channel idea of reaching customers and supercharging your customer relationship by having physical locations is a reality. And I think Nykaa, a company that went public this year as well, has offline locations. And so I think this idea that you should reach customers where they are is real. And India, interestingly, has over 100,000 pharmacies around the country. They're all fragmented. The largest single operator of pharmacies runs about 3,000. Today, we run about 130, mostly in Bombay. We've expanded to Pune and another city. And the reality of what we're doing is we're saying, look, the cost of medicine shouldn't be so high. India is a drug creating capital of the world. We can produce drugs really cheap, but we mark them up. Relative to the US, it's still very cheap, but they get marked up, and therefore, can we sell the generic version and save people money? Now, doing that, we are then layering in more technology to say, can we improve how customers manage their health? So I would like to see the business go from, and I would like to see healthcare go from rather than reactive to being proactive. And so can we now work with the patients who we've built trust with to do that? The second business that we went into is in mental health. And I think mental health, again, is one of those areas that's really under acknowledged. It was a taboo topic in India. In 2017, the government decriminalized the act of suicide. So if you tried to commit suicide and you were unsuccessful, you were treated as a criminal. In 2017, they decriminalized it, recognized it as a mental disorder. They also mandated that insurance companies cover mental health issues. So now, as a result, again, the best way to start reaching people, because mental disorders are not going to be conveniently located in a large major metro. They're going to be everywhere around the country. Now, for you to open up facilities, get mental health services everywhere is going to be challenging. But here again, we have a great base of therapists that we graduate every year here, psychiatrists that graduate every year here. Unfortunately, we lose them. They all go elsewhere, and they end up finding jobs in the UK, in Australia, in the US. And so I think that if we now can create a platform that allows them to earn and work and be here, they will do that. And so we're absolutely doing that. And as we've done that, again, it just happened in the course of the business. We started getting lots of people downloading the app in Southeast Asia. We had people in the US and Europe as well, but the larger base started coming from there. And so we've realized that, okay, now there are rules to how you can provide mental health services in other countries. And so healthcare, and that second part of your question, sort of exporting these services on a platform to other markets has its own issues. In health, I think you have to adhere to the regulations in every country individually, and I think that's something to consider. But I think Rebel has already managed to export their platform of food and cloud kitchens to other markets. I think you're going to see that in finance and in some of the neobanks that are coming about, and how they're going to address consumer opportunities across corridors. India exports a lot of people as well. And so as those people go from one market to another, their credit history, their finance history doesn't go. And now, however, if I know who you are in one country, I can bank you in another country. And I can do that with a neobank quite efficiently, as opposed to traditional banks that are unwilling to perhaps take that risk in that way. So I would say that you're absolutely going to see over the next 5 years, my belief is companies that have scaled in India, have understood their model, have got great unit economics, are going to start to attack these opportunities in neighboring countries and geographies. And you're going to start to see that growth take place. So yeah, it's definitely going to happen.
Okay, well, good. Lawrence Tang from Invest Hong Kong has a question that actually has been on my mind as well about government support to India tech companies. So in China, it was always given that, okay, you succeeded partly because of government help, right? In India, it was kind of, you heard the reverse. You succeeded despite the government. Is that changing at all? Can tech startups today, what kind of help can they get from the government? Or is it still kind of a issue of the two are pretty separated and don't depend on the government for help? Just what is the situation now with government help?
Yeah, so look, I think that the government has recognized the importance of tech, and that started at the beginning of Modi's term, and I would say that they made very sweeping, large statements about the importance of it. They started initiatives around it, some of which have been successful. None of them have been necessarily at the pace, I would argue, that China was able to create and the infrastructure they were able to create. But again, look, we're a very large, loud, messy democracy. And that means that you can't be authoritarian in how you handle things. And I cannot profess to understand how to manage a country like that in politics. So I'm going to stay away from necessarily saying whether they're doing it correctly or incorrectly. I would say that they're very clear that technology and investments in technology and that sector growing is important. Now, let's talk about the things that I think that they're doing well in regards to that. They created the digital stack, and the digital stack has been phenomenal. It's been executed at a scale that's unprecedented anywhere in the world. It's enabled financial transactions at a level, again, that I don't think any system could have done in this manner. Today, I think in the month of October alone, we did about 4.2 billion transactions on a platform called UPI. UPI is Unified Payment Infrastructure. It was built by the government as a platform to allow consumers to transact in a digital manner. There's no cost to it. You can just transact. This year, we should hit about $1 trillion being transacted on UPI. 85% or so of the transactions online are on UPI. So this is a digital stack that the government built. Now, that's going to eat away and eat into the margins and the transaction fees of a lot of people. Okay, that's probably bad, you would argue, for some people, but it's massive for starting to include people into the government, into the formalized tech economy. And that was facilitated by the government. If I look at, as I mentioned earlier, in the health space, their reassessment of their position on certain things in mental health was good. I'll give you another area that's often not thought about in relation to tech, infrastructure. Now, if I look at logistics costs as a percentage of your overall production costs for an e-commerce business, in India today, it's at about 18%. In China, by comparison, it's about half of that. Now, why is it so high? Because those roads that I mentioned earlier that are so inefficient to get around just cause chaos. Now, many years back, they changed their taxation structure to allow for one tax around the country, which was good and bad. And look, that's a debate for another time around whether GST as a system was good or bad. But what they did is in doing that, they said, okay, you can move goods across states much more easily. Mm-hmm. Now, to move goods across states, you need roads. We were building roads at a pace of about 16 kilometers a day back in 2014. Today, we're building at about 37 kilometers a day. So we've increased the rate at which we build roads. Now, the expectation is in the next 5 years, we should get to about 100 kilometers a day. If you get there, then you're able to finally create roads that connect cities in an effective way. They've identified a golden quadrilateral that will actually connect the 4 major metros, and all of that will make goods and services moving better. So my point is, it's not as bad perhaps as we used to say that, you know, we succeed despite the government. I would say that the government definitely is aware. I don't think there's a alignment anywhere in the world between tech and government on how things should work. I mean, the US is going through its own challenges now. Should tech companies be that big? Should they be allowed to do what they do? So I think you're going to face some back and forth here. But overall, I think that my big sort of hope from the government is that they just be consistent. And I think that's oftentimes a challenge. And so you have retroactive taxes, you have sudden movements in directions that cause chaos. That's unfortunate. I would like it to be easier to close a business, which means then that it would be easier to start a business, because if you fail, what's the big deal? But it's bureaucracy, paperwork, that stuff exists. Everyone's aware of it. They're cutting at it. I think we move in step functions in India. Our theme last year was gradually, then suddenly. That played out. It took us a long time to get to where we are, and then boom, it's taken off. I think the digital stack that's been implemented in finance is going to get implemented into legal documents. I'll give you an example. My vaccination in India, I have a record of it on my phone as an app. I can log in. It's there. It's accessible to anyone. There's a QR code. It's all digitized. As far as I understand, in the US, you get a card that is a piece of paper that checks a box, and which, so I would argue we're quite far advanced, and that's a government initiative. So I'd say, look, it's a challenge, but they're trending in the right direction.
Sure, sure. Well, one of the other issues in the regulatory framework is the whole issue of IPOs, and certainly we're seeing the pressure over Chinese companies listed in the US and maybe delisting now and going to Hong Kong perhaps. And in India, you have the issue of Chinese or Indian companies not being able to list directly on NASDAQ or NYSE or another market outside the India market. Do you see that changing at all? Because it seems like that could be a real driver of innovation and growth of these tech companies if they could list directly into an overseas exchange.
You know, if we had this conversation a year ago, I would have said absolutely, and that was a big need and a requirement. The last 6 to 8 months have shown that, look, as a tech company in India, I don't have to worry about that. I'm getting valued here very fairly, if not aggressively. I have access to marquee foreign mutual funds, hedge funds that are all figured out how to invest in the country and have been doing so for many years. We may not have access to retail investors in the same way, but there's a big retail investor community that's growing now in India. And as they're seeing the companies that they interact with on a day-to-day basis go public, and therefore they're going to come into the fold as well. So as we sit today, I would say that the need for that to be solved isn't as burning a need as it was a year ago. That being said, look, I don't doubt that the largest pools of capital sit outside of India. And if you made it easier for them to access and you made a broader base of them to access it, sure, it couldn't hurt. But I guess on my list of problems to solve right now, it's dropped a bit on the list because liquidity is found now. I mean, we look at it this year, like I said, this year alone, fiscal year, we'll see close to 85 to 90 billion dollars worth of IPOs take place, which is phenomenal. That's just in the tech space. And so if I look at that and I say, you know, all right, we're moving in the right direction. I believe that every single company that was considering a foreign listing as the only option has reassessed. Companies that were already incorporated outside, let's take Freshworks, for example. They went public on the NASDAQ in the US, but their business is geared towards US customers. So it made sense for them to be public there. It's a marketing event for them there, more so than it needs to be here. But Zomato, Nykaa, Policy Bazaar, Paytm, Droom in our portfolio, these are all companies that are consumer businesses in India. They have a lot of value to go public here in India.
Okay. So then you mentioned Droom, that is that going to go public soon?
Yeah, we filed about, I would say, 4 weeks ago. So waiting for comments from the regulator and starting the roadshow. And so I would hope by the first quarter, it should be public.
All right. So where's the energy in the tech space in India today? Is it new age companies, the startups? Is it the acquirers coming in from overseas that are snapping up these startups, these emerging companies? Where's the energy today in the tech market in India?
You know, it's actually really great because it's across all of those areas. I think in the past, the problem has been that the energy was all, let me get in early, let me build, let me build, let me build, let me build. And there was no one buying the stuff at the other end.
Right.
And again, last year, 2 years ago, we talked about the idea that every market has its super consolidators. The US had FANG, or I guess now it's MANA, or pick a name, that
Right.
acronym that calls their name to. But anyways, the big guys. China's had that. So we had a moniker that we came up called Mr. Fat Bug, and that represented Indian companies like a Make My Trip and a Reliance. It had companies like Flipkart or Facebook. It had Alibaba. It had Tencent, and all of these were going to be possible acquirers because India was India for what it is. It's an open market, so you could see large traditional Indian companies acquire. You could see foreign companies come and acquire. You could see foreign tech companies come and acquire. It didn't matter. And over the last couple of years, that's happened. In the past year, Reliance has been very active acquiring businesses. Amazon has been active acquiring businesses. Tata has been active acquiring businesses. So consolidation is happening there. The other amazing thing that happened is the equity value, the valuations that these tech companies are getting has enabled them to acquire traditional companies. And so suddenly you had Byju's, which is probably the world's largest now education business, acquiring a traditional offline tuition company for over $1 billion. And so new tech company acquiring old business. So M&A is happening there. You're finding large consolidators. You're having M&A happen both among tech companies acquiring other tech companies acquiring traditional businesses. You're finding liquidity for early stage investors coming from late guys. So we saw over $1 billion of secondaries into companies like a Zomato, a Pine Labs, a Dream 11, all sorts of businesses where larger investors wanted a bigger piece of the pie, were willing to write larger checks and needed to write larger checks. And so they cashed out people, and that started to happen. All the while, we've never seen more new companies get started. And so there are more early stage investors, more entrepreneurs, more second-time entrepreneurs,
Right.
which is also, by the way, for the ecosystem, phenomenal, because there was a University of Chicago study done a long time ago that said second-time entrepreneurs, whether they were successful or failed, are twice as likely to be successful in their venture than first-time entrepreneurs. And there was no way I could have second-time entrepreneurs in the market until there were second-time entrepreneurs in the market. We've now been through a cycle. People have exited. People have shut down. People have done whatever. They're starting new businesses. So that's really exciting. So you get to partner with them, build out their businesses, work, and they've seen how to do that before. They have a network. They have teams they can hire. All of that is kind of clicking. So yeah, I guess the answer to your question is it's all exciting. I mean, every side of the equation is really good right now.
So what about the metaverse and crypto in India? These are areas that are very, very hot and in the news all the time in Silicon Valley and in tech circles, in other markets too. What about in India?
So there's an exchange called CoinSwitch, CoinSwitch Kuber.
Yeah.
They raised about 200 million from Andreessen. They have 11 million crypto accounts on their platform. There are a total of 50 million equity accounts in India. So they have 20% of the total equity accounts in India. So to put that in perspective, that means that 20% of the market is more willing to invest in Dogecoin and Shibu, Bitcoin, Ethereum, more so than Reliance, Tata, and those types of businesses. So it's definitely here. People are talking about it, thinking about it, building on it. I think the whole idea of Web3 and the whole idea of distributed creativity, distributed companies, everything being distributed in some way is a reality. India probably is in the best position to benefit from it because you suddenly have this large base of engineers that in any case are happy to rather be here. And look, we've seen it in our companies. During the lockdown, people went back to their hometown. And many of them come from places that are not where the companies are located. They're continuing to work from there. And that's working out fine. So I think that all of that is going to mean that crypto, NFTs, DeFi, it's going to have a role. I don't think that for all the money that's going into it in the West, I don't think that everybody has clarity on what exactly that's going to look like at the end. But yeah, the same thing's going to start here and it's going to move, and it's definitely going to be an area of growth.
Right, right, right. So yeah, certainly a lot of it has changed over the past year and a half with remote working, and it's interesting that people in India too have not really gone back full time to the office. So that it seems to be a global phenomenon. How is the vaccination rate? Just to talk a little bit about COVID, how is the vaccination rate in India, and what's going on currently with the virus?
So right now with Omicron and all, I think it seems to be under control. We in the first wave had intense lockdowns. Second wave came in March or so of this year. Again, a bit strict on the lockdowns for a period of time, but then that came under control. That was definitely a harder wave. During that time, they pushed the vaccinations. We hit a point where we had difficulty getting it out to everybody. Today, if I remember correctly, I'm actually just going to see if I can look it up while we're talking. We have a reasonable base of the eligible population has received their first vaccine. I think it's about 50% of the people that are eligible have received both shots. I think it was about 70 or 80% of the eligible base have received their first shot. Now, again, if you take it on an absolute number basis, 1.3 billion people, I think if you look at an eligible population, maybe of 700, 800 million, and you say that even if 50% of them receive their first dose so far, that's 350 to 400 million. And so as a result, I think we've done quite well. And so I think we can do better. There's more that can be done. And I think that's an ongoing opportunity and challenge. But right now, I think we're in a decent place.
Okay, well, good. Certainly the US could use some improvement as well on those scores and many other scores, I think. So we're going to go with launching our poll, which we normally do in our show, which is kind of the really fun part of the show. If you're not having fun yet, then please join us and log in your answers to a couple of questions here, which are just to kind of gauge the feeling out there, the mood out there in the tech world. Okay, have you ever been to India? Okay, is the first one. Which is
I can't vote on this.
Yeah, you can't. Okay, and then do you believe the party is just getting started in India? We know you have a biased view there, Sandeep. So okay, so most people are weighing in on. Well, votes are still coming in on that one, but not too many said no on that. But quite a few people said maybe, and it looks like the yes is winning out. I don't know. I think they're trying to make friends with you, Sandeep.
Yeah.
Okay, which is the hotter tech market right now, China or India? Okay, 25% said China and 75% said India. Are you planning international travel for Q1 2022? That's really split down the middle, half and half. Interesting. And this is a question I wanted us to talk to a little bit about the Paytm IPO, but is the tech market, VC market overheated? Again, that's split down the middle. So that's pretty interesting. But what about that Paytm IPO? It was kind of a disappointment from the India IPOs. But anyhow, thank you all for joining in on us with us for the poll. And I think we have seen the results here. Have you ever been to India? 56%. Do you believe the party's just getting started in India? 67% yes. Which market is hotter? India gets 67%. Are you planning international travel? That's pretty much split. And then is the tech VC market overheated? 56% say no. So there we go. So what about this question of is the tech market overheated, Sandeep? Because what happened to Paytm's IPO?
Look, I think that that was a good indication that people are being discerning and thoughtful about what they're looking to invest in and how they're deciding to value businesses. I think that Paytm is a complicated story and one that requires perhaps more time, more to evolve and settle. They've entered lots of areas. Let's look at the ones that did well. Very straightforward stories in Nykaa, in Zomato, in Policy Bazaar. These businesses are food delivery, health and beauty, insurance. You get it. You understand the drivers, you understand the customer, you know what's happening. Paytm has many different aspects to it, and I think that they're also evolving and figuring out what their end outcome is going to look like. And in that context, if you go out with the country's largest ever IPO and sell a proposition that's intended to be at a certain value, and you have investors say, wait a second, I believe there's some value here. I think that there's something that's working, but I don't know if I can value it at that level yet. And therefore, I need to be careful. So I don't think that that's an indication of the broader market being overheated. To me, it was actually a little bit comforting to say that, okay, people are not blindly investing. I lived through the dot-com boom in the late 90s in the US. I mean, it didn't matter. You just had to put the word .com or E or I somewhere at the beginning, and you were going to get a massive valuation. And I think that I would have been more worried if there was no filter in general. And I think that today, that gives you some comfort that, all right, if they can get their story correct and if they can tell it, they'll get it. If they can't, then you don't. And that's fine. And it's incumbent upon them now to make that case, which is, I think, a healthy place for a market to be.
Sure. Well, the filter is very important. Okay, so let me just share a few more slides as we close out today. We did our poll, and I'd like to highlight that our next show is going to be our Consumer Electronics Show, January 6th, 2022, 4 to 6:15 p.m. We've got a great show lined up, and hopefully you'll go on to this website right here, Silicon Dragon CES 2022, and look at the program. And then anyone who is a member of our Silicon Dragon Circle obviously gets comp tickets throughout the whole year next year. Happy New Year. And thank you again for joining us. Thank you, Invest Hong Kong, for your support. Thank you for YouTube for showing our videos, and Zoom for providing a platform. And hey, thank you most of all to Sandeep for his great insights. I think we all learned a lot about the India market, and I do agree with John Chambers, who has actually been on our show twice. And he talked about India, and I think he has 2 startups in India that he's invested in. So there you go. You can't have a better endorsement than that. So thank you again, Sanjeev. Really appreciate it. And we'll see you again next time.
Excellent, Rebecca. Thank you so much. And happy holidays to everyone. And see you soon.
Okay.
Take care.
See you. Okay. Bye now. Bye now.